Hello, friends, and welcome to lesson 3 of Unit 4. This particular lesson is on development strategies and agriculture. The learning outcomes for this lesson would be Transforming India 2030. So, we'll be looking at what India has decided in terms of the development. Uh, Second, we'll talk about inclusive growth as part of Transforming India. Then, we'll talk about SDG index, that is a Sustainable Development Goal Index. And then we'll switch over to agriculture and more specifically, we'll discuss two things. One is agriculture marketing and agriculture price policy. The three pillars of economic development, as we say, are exports, productivity, and sustainability. So, when we talk about the development strategies, so for economic development of any country, you have to work on these three pillars. So when we talk about exports, so it is the external investment, which we discussed in detail as foreign direct investment, and the business incentives within the country so that uh, no area or no region of the country is left where which is not contributing to the gross domestic product. Second part is productivity. In order to enhance the productivity, you need the capital, so you have to concentrate on capital, labor, land and infrastructure, technology management, and information. So these are the four areas uh, which you have to look in for enhancing the productivity and thereby the economic development. Sustainability is very, very important. As we discussed that today we talk about Human Development Index. So, under sustainability, you have to look at quality of life, environment, and human happiness index or human development, as we say under economic development. So, for your public policies, for your planning, for the development strategies, you need to look at these three pillars and your policy should revolve around them. So, when we talk about India in particular, so India has now looking at a very sustainable plan, which we call as the development strategy of transforming India by 2030. Not only we are looking at a sustainable economic development, but we have set up the goals, and these are the 7 goals which come under Transforming India 2030, which I would like to share as part of development strategies with you. Starting with partnerships for the goals. So, in isolation, the sectors or the regions or the states cannot achieve the goals on their own. So, partnerships have to be built and synergies have to be created in order to transform India. The strategies that we have built as part of the development goals has no role for poverty, so we are working towards eradicating poverty to its fullest. Then comes here quality education, and the NEP New Education Policy 2020, which has come, is towards that to enhance the quality of education in our country. And we discussed about the skill development. So at the input side, the government has decided to enhance the quality and also to upskill the manpower in our country. Then comes gender equality. We talked about that. So the policies, the strategies have been built around that so that more women empowerment and women should come into the workforce. Decent jobs and economic growth. So without economic growth, economic development cannot happen, which we discussed. So unemployment should go down, theoretically come down to zero, and that can only be possible through a fast economic growth. The inequalities in the country have to be reduced, and sustainable cities and communities who can sustain on their own. That's the goal for transforming India 2030. So these are the 7 goals which have been set. Very important part is inclusive growth, which all the governments have been advocating from time to time, and a lot of policies have been framed around that. In order to understand the inclusive growth from 3 angles, that is base, of course, of economic growth is very important, but the pattern of economic growth so that inequalities are removed is very important, and that can only happen if we include everyone in the economic growth of the country. Second is poverty reduction. I don't have to say more about that. And third is the growth which can be sustained and which is not just for 1 or 2 years or next 4 to 5 years. So you need to sustain that growth. Now, when we talk about inclusive growth, it has to be done at 3 levels. Number one is the geographies. That means all the backward areas, whether economically backward or otherwise, so they have to be included. So the focus has to be for the development policies, the development strategies, which can bring these economically backward areas into the mainstream. Second is at the business level. So whether these are small businesses and more so in the rural areas where the businesses should come up. So for them, the microfinance and also upskilling along with self-help groups are needed so that they become part of the economic growth of the country. At the individual level, so all the individuals or groups who are either socially or economically backward, they should be encouraged to be part of the mainstream. So inclusive growth has to be done at 3 levels. India has come up in 2019 with a Sustainable Development Goals Index. So they have put up 16 different criteria for calculating the index, and so this is calculated as a maximum index of 100. So every state is given a SDG index in 2019. Now these 16 indices which have been set up as parameters, they they are they are covering all the sustainable development goals that we have discussed, starting like good health to quality education, gender equality, climate action. So on each parameter, each state is judged and then given the SDG. Just to share with you, the top 12 states with the maximum index are like this. Like Kerala is topping with 70, Himachal is second, 69, Andhra, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Karnataka, Goa, Sikkim, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Uttarakhand, and 12th is Punjab with 62 index. At the bottom, there are 5 states: Bihar, Jharkhand, Arunachal, Meghalaya, UP, and Assam, each with 55. Amongst the UTs, Union Territories, Chandigarh is at the top with 70, with the same index as Kerala, Pondicherry, Dadra and Nagar Haveli, Lakshadweep, Delhi, and then Andaman and Nicobar Islands and Daman and Diu. If you would like to know the 16 indices, these are SDG 1 to 16, starting with no poverty, zero hunger, good health, quality education, like this. Now, Tamil Nadu is at the top for no poverty, zero hunger, Goa, good health, Kerala. So, like this, you can look at all the 16 parameters. And when you look at one of the things which is life and land, Haryana is at the bottom. And if you look at industry, innovation, and infrastructure, Gujarat is number one. Second is Kerala, and Mizoram is at the bottom. Another very good aspect which you should have a look at is sustainable consumption and production, which is SDG 12, Nagaland with 100 index. And similarly, reduced inequalities, Telangana is at 94. So similarly, when you look at life and land, where Haryana is at the bottom with 40, Manipur is at number one with 100. So it's a good thing to do, and these are sustainable development goals which every state, and that is how, if everyone contributes, then the economic development of the country as a whole will go up. Now let us switch over to agriculture, which has been the primary occupation of India, and around 50 to 58% varying over the years of employment is provided by this sector. Agriculture has been at the forefront of our country, although it has been neglected um, a lot over the years, and its contribution to the GDP is going down. So, agricultural bowl of the world is India, still. Largest producer of milk, as you know, is India, pulses and spices. India is also the second largest producer of rice, wheat, fish, fruits, and vegetables. And India has the largest area in the world under rice and wheat. So, with these facts and with agriculture as our main focus, let us look at where we stand today. So, the gross value added by agriculture and allied agricultural sectors from 2013 to 2020, the graph which you are seeing is from 1.4% to 2.6%. So from 2012 onwards, it is on a decline, and it is not very sustainable contribution which is there. So it is again, if you now look, it is almost at 3%. That is the contribution to the GDP. So if you look from 1718 to 1819, so total GDP from 6.6 to 7.4, and the gross value added is 6.4 to 7.2, that is GVA. By the agriculture sector is 3, which is not changing, and industry is from 4.8 to 7. So the manufacturing basically has really made in India, efforts have really done well. Service sector has really contributed well, as we had seen earlier, also from 8.3 to 8.6 in just yearly growth, year-on-year growth. Now, when we look at agriculture, I think India has the advantage on 4 fronts. Number one is there is a huge domestic demand because of our population, and also external demand is huge with the growing population. So, in terms of demand, it is going to be there for decades. Second is we have got very attractive opportunities in terms of if we are able to do our storage in a better way, that is the warehousing, and also if we can set up the food processing industry in a better way, then it is a very attractive opportunity for domestic as well as for the export market. Government has been trying to come up with different policies to support agriculture in a big way. And recently, government has come out with lot of new policy frameworks to take agriculture to the new level where it is trying to double the income of farmers by 2022. India has the competitive advantage in terms of fertility of soil, in terms of climatic conditions, and we can grow every crop because India is so diverse and is climatically very conducive to all sort of crops. So India can really benefit from agriculture if the focus is there and there is a cohesive effort made by all the stakeholders. Another thing which you should be looking at for Indian agriculture sector is the yield. India is doing very well in terms of the two crops which are the main crops, which is rice, which we call paddy and wheat. So if you look at the world yield in kg per hectare for rice, it is 4,300. So 4,300 kg per hectare is the yield. India is not bad with 2,400 and Punjab is really good at 3,000, almost 4,000. But just look at China, 6,600 and South Korea, 6,700. So the usage of technology and new ways of increasing the yield is something India needs to adopt. In terms of wheat, if you look at the world average is 3,000 kg per hectare. India is at 3,150, which is above the world average. Punjab is doing well at 5,000, but look at France for wheat, 7,500. So 2.5 times, I would say, of India. Look at China again, 4,800. So this is one area where India has to work hard. At the same time, the farmers' condition in India is not very good, as all of you might be seeing, and some of you are from the farming community or the farming families, so you'll be knowing more than me about this. So in India, the farmers' woes can be put like this. There is a lot of rural indebtedness because of a lot of money which they have borrowed. Second is the small holdings, land holdings. So as a result, the operational size of holdings is small. So that is reflected in the yield as well as their income and the profitability. So at present, the farmers feel that they are at the threshold of the yields. So a lot of research like the university in Punjab, Punjab Agricultural University, Haryana Agricultural University, Himachal Pradesh, if we talk of North, are working hard on that. We are still very dependent on rains, and if good monsoons are there, so we are into the rain-fed conditions. So farmer is very much dependent on that, rather than other means where China has done very well. Farmers are looking at assured marketing, a price so that surety is there because there are a lot of risks for the crops in terms of the input price, in terms of the period, in terms of the demand, fluctuation in demand. So they are looking at assured marketing, which we are going to talk about in price policy. And farmers, since their condition has not improved, although the farm produce, the yield, the consumers are getting all the benefits, but the condition of farmers remain pathetic. And in terms of their incomes, the rise is not as per other sectors. And from the government side, they very poor extension services in terms of the sport, for the farming know-how, the inputs like the seeds, fertilizers, etc. So those extension services are not as good as in other countries. So there are two aspects in agriculture which we should be looking at. One is agricultural marketing and another is the price policy. So when we talk about the agricultural marketing, it is of two types. One is the input marketing and the other is the product marketing. This diagram will explain that. So in order to uh, get your crops, so you need some farm inputs in terms of seeds, fertilizers, and other manures or implements in terms of the machinery that you require. So that is what we call as input market. And the other name is the product market, which we call as the output market when the crop is ready. So uh, those products and the value added products or to sell them in the market. That is the second output market or product marketing mode, so we call it. Now, the government has created a framework for that, which I'll be discussing. So, when we talk about the agricultural marketing, so it involves not only the input in terms of the seeds, manure, fertilizers that we discussed, it also involves assembling, storage, processing, transportation, packaging, grading, distribution, and finally selling across the country. So that complete thing is agricultural marketing. How the government has set up the framework: number one, it has tried to set up a regulated market where the farmers can sell it. Second is the development of infrastructure in terms of storage and also for packaging and for distribution. So, like FCI, Food Corporation of India, is one such organization which is working towards that, and different state bodies are also have been set up for that. Third is the cooperative marketing. So, wherein government has created these cooperative markets for the farmers. So one is regulation, second is creating those cooperative markets for the farmers for their selling and distribution. So what are the policy instruments which government has created for the to protect the farmers? One is MSP, minimum support price, which we are going to discuss in the next slide. Second is maintenance of buffer stock. So it is because of two reasons. One, because if the monsoons are not good, you have the buffer stock to fill in the demand in the next period. Second is when the prices go up, there is more demand than the supply. Then from the buffer stock, government puts in to meet that demand which has increased. Also, government tries to rural poverty where it is feeding the people who are below poverty line. So through the public distribution system, and for that the procurement by the government is there. So these are the three channels. One is buffer stock, MSP, and third is the PDS, public distribution system. Price policy in India is a very complex subject, and there has not been any goodwill from both the sides, either from the farming community or from the government side, which has created some um, happiness amongst the two sides. So there are three aspects to the price policy. Number one is, as I said, the government has to procure the food grains for the public distribution system. Secondly, government has to provide a reasonable price for the food grains to the farmers, but at the same time which is affordable to the consumers. And third is through the price, so that to induce adoption of new technology to increase the yield So let us try to understand that, and let us start with the MSP, which we talk minimum support price. So it is fixed by the government, and this is something which the government procures and gives to the farmers. So it is also the price that government agencies pay whenever they procure any particular crop. So at present, the government fixes prices, MSPs, for 23 crops, but it is not legally bound to procure all 23 crops or pay these uh, even when the market rates, even if it is below the announced MSPs. So there is no legal binding on the government, but there is a framework under which it fixes the MSP. Now, how the government fixes the MSP, that is worthwhile to consider. So, you know, the Kharif and Rabi, the rice and wheat season. So, these are the two major crops and under the maximum cultivation in our country. So, the government will first look at what it calls as A2, that is all the actual expenses which the farmer incurs, whether it is seed, fertilizer, labor, fuel, irrigation, so the direct cost which we call. And then comes the family labor, like that is included, uh, so which is unpaid family labor, which is involved in looking after those crops. And third part is the capital assets, like the land which the farmer owns and uses for growing these crops. So the farmer has foregone the revenue on that owned land, which we call as the capital asset, right? So in terms of rent, or maybe in terms of the interest, as that becomes a capital asset for the farmer. So when they include A2 plus FL plus C2, and it is done by a Commission for Agricultural Cost and Prices, CACP, which comes out with this price. That is what we call as MSP. Now, the history of MSP is like this. There was a time in mid 60s when India was deficit of food, of these crops. So at that point of time, the government wanted to boost the domestic production, and that is when the green revolution happened. But the farmers, because of high cost of input and cost intensive crops like wheat and paddy, government tried to give a minimum price so that farmers are encouraged to have these crops. So if you look at 66, 67, it was 54 per quintal. That was the MSP which was fixed for the first time. So if I compare for wheat from 70, 71, it has come from 76 to almost 2000 in 2021. Paddy from 51 to almost 1868. But if we look at the problem of the farmers, so for example, the rice, the production has been 118 million tons, whereas the procurement is only 51 metric tons. So 43% of procurement out of the produced one is there. Similarly for cotton, 29, and so on. So that's where the problem is. At that price, the farmer is not getting even the MSP which has been fixed by the government. So still there is a war going on, and farmers are not very happy with the new farm policy. So because as long as the procurement at the MSP is not there of the total production, farmers are not going to get something. But at the same time, government has come out with a few major initiatives which it calls from farm to fork, covering starting with sowing, where the seeds, that is the input marketing, to growing, harvesting, storage, and marketing. At each stage, it has come out with multiple schemes. These are some of the initiatives. Now, why these initiatives have been taken? As an example, India produces 70 million tons of fruits and vegetables, and it loses around 3,000 crore INR on that because there is no food processing onto that. In terms of organic farming, so the government has come out with sustainable enhancement of soil fertility. Soil health cards have been created so that farmers know about what type of soil and what all crops they should be putting over there. Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, which is how to use precision irrigation, which is drip irrigation, so as to not waste the water. In terms of fertilizer, so uh, subsidizing it and trying to use the right fertilizers for the right crops. So that is the outreach of the government to the farmers. So in terms of warehousing, storage, food processing, it has come out with schemes. Pan India electronic trading platform has been set up by the government. Then Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, that is so that all the risks which are there for the farmer to grow the crop are minimized. So that is all from my side. So we discussed Transforming India 2030, Inclusive Growth, STG Index, Agriculture Marketing, and Agriculture Price Policy. Here is a small quiz for you. Question number 1, 3 pillars of economic development. What are these? How many parameters are there for STG index? And number 3, what are the 2 types of marketing in agriculture? So the 3 pillars are exports, productivity, and sustainability. There are 16 parameters on which the STG index is decided for each state. The 2 types of marketing in agriculture are input and product marketing. So friends, that is all from my side. Any questions, feel free to write to me. If you go for further reading, this is one good link on farm to fork supply chain, which is a very good article if you would like to read. So thank you very much for such good audience. Bye for now. Shabba khair.